So one of my favorite noir classics of the late 1940s is the film Out of the Past. It's got everything you could love in an old black and white crime film. Robert Mitchum is this cool, small-town gas station owner, but he's got a shady past, and he's just trying to hide out, start his life again, and find a new love and so on. But he gets drawn back into his old, dark life again, and in the process encounters Jane Greer as a gorgeous, mysterious femme fatale. And even though the two have a fiery romance, there's danger brewing as she's actually the girlfriend of an ice-cold crime boss played by Kirk Douglas. So this is a remarkable film, and I loved watching and reviewing it. So I was excited to check out the film The Big Steal, which came out in 1949, just 2 years after this one, with the same two leads, Mitchum and Greer. Now, knowing absolutely nothing about this film going into it, was this going to be more of the same? No. This was a very different movie in tone and style, and totally not what I expected, and yet I still enjoyed it just the same. This was actually a fast-paced crime thriller with a touch of comedy and romance involving a cat-and-mouse chase through Mexico. It was a fun and lighthearted film, and a lot of fun to watch. So I'll talk about the film, spoiler-free, and then offer some closing thoughts. The story here is that U.S. Army Lieutenant Duke Halliday, with cool-as-a-cucumber Robert Mitchum, has been robbed of a huge payroll by Jim Fisk, actor Patrick Knowles. Now, Halliday's superior, Captain Vincent Blake, played by William Bendix, wants to grab him for this money, but Halliday escapes and pursues Fisk all the way down into Mexico. Now, along the way, he happens to run into Joan Graham, played by lovely actress Jane Greer. And she is also after Fisk, as she's a jilted lover who's after the money that she had lent to him that she never got back. So the two of them end up working together, both pursuing Fisk and also escaping the very persistent Blake, who is on their trail. And to make things more complicated, when Halliday gets close to stopping Fisk from escaping at one point, he comes to the attention of the Mexican police inspector, General Ortega, played by actor Ramon Navarro. Halliday pretends to be Blake, using stolen identification he took from him. So Ortega lets him go, but it's one of those, as he puts it, he's the cat letting the mouse go in order to capture all of the mice. Fisk stays ahead of Halliday's pursuit, and he continues to be chased by Blake, and there are lots of chases in this film, frequently involving animals and barricades and so on to elude one another. Now, Halliday and Graham finally track down Fisk to a safe house out in the desert, where they encounter a fence, this mousy character Seton, played by John Quaylen, and he's willing to pay him off in untraceable bills for the payroll. But wouldn't you know it, a shootout follows, and soon Blake arrives. What happens to wrap up this big, crazy mess? Well, no spoilers, but the ending was wild and a little unexpected, so go and check this one out for yourself. The Big Steal was directed by Don Siegel, a real legend of a director who has a number of excellent films he's worked on, such as Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Escape from Alcatraz, and one of my personal favorites, The Lineup from 1956 with Eli Wallach. The film was produced by RKO and was based on the short story The Road to Carmichael's by Richard Wormser. So my thoughts on this film was that this was an entertaining and, again, not what I expected at all, just a fun chase movie through Mexico with lots and lots of dusty pursuits along treacherous roads as everyone seems to be after each other throughout the duration of the film. You have themes of mistrust with Mitchum and Greer's characters as they slowly start to work together, leading towards a budding romance. The dialogue and comic tension kept this from ever really feeling too serious to me. Like, you know things are going to work out by the end of the film, but then there's that ending that I won't spoil. It's a little unexpected, but it wraps up the story nicely. This was a short film, and the pace is nice to it, and I really enjoyed it. And while Mitchum and Greer do have a really sweet relationship in the film, growing closer as things progress in the film. I'll be honest that there isn't really the same fiery chemistry that they had in the film Out of the Past. But I enjoyed watching both of them together through one close call after another, and they're really great here. And by the way, at one point watching the film during the car chase scene, I'm fairly sure they run over a chicken, and I'm not sure YouTube will let me show it. Chicken cruelty could get me demonetized. So if you're curious, it's around the 30-minute, 50-second mark. Come on, the film's on Prime for $3, so you can check it out for yourself to see why the chicken tried to cross the road. Other noteworthy performances in the film, you had William Bendix, who's always great when I catch him in an older film, and he's this frustrated, driven character in this film that's relentless in his pursuit. And through the film, there's enough mystery surrounding his character, you never really know for sure what's going to happen when he finally catches up with the couple. Patrick Knowles, as well, was great as this slick thief who was also on the run, and I remember him as Will Scarlet from The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. It's a great film. I also appreciated how the film is set largely in Mexico, and there's just enough Spanish spoken in the film that if you're like me and you're surviving on high school Spanish, you can get by. There are no subtitles to the film, but then again, they're not really needed. Most of the American leads speak a spattering of Spanish, and that's enough to work for the film. And something I learned researching the film. Watching it, I had figured that this was probably just going to be fake Mexico and just a Hollywood product, filmed on backlots and Hollywood Canyon roads and so on. And sure, some of the film was in California, but a fair amount of the film was actually shot in Mexico, in places like Veracruz and Mexico City. In fact, the Hotel Mexico shown early in the film still exists in Tehuacan in Mexico. There's also a Hotel Peñafiel. And yeah. Tell me off in the comments if I'm butchering these names. Remember high school Spanish? And it's a resort in Mexico that, as far as I can tell, it isn't around anymore. But it really looks inviting in the film, with pools filled with flowers and so on, as the characters sit nearby and sip on fancy drinks. Now, while researching the film, some of the background is just wild. Robert Mitchum had just served 60 days in jail for marijuana possession. Remember, this is the 1940s, and that was right before he began work on the film. And it was stuff like this that made bigger headlines at the time, more so than the film itself. Drug charges could ruin a career in Hollywood back then, but not so with Robert Mitchum. He just had this cool bad guy image to him, and this sort of thing just helped his public image and the films that he was in. Now, originally, the cast was set to include George Raft and Elizabeth Scott. And having seen plenty of their films, I could see that working, but maybe not in the same way, of course. And another wild bit of trivia is that RKO head Howard Hughes apparently had something of a grudge against actress Jane Greer. She was a former girlfriend, so he used his clout and authority as a studio head to try to keep her from appearing in any RKO films, in an attempt to ruin her career. But he ultimately went with her when no other actress would take the part. I mean, that's not cool, but from what I've read about Hughes, he would get his comeuppance later in life. Now, to circle back to the opening of the review, if I had to choose between this film and Out of the Past, I would have to go with that one as the better film. And look, I enjoyed both films, but Out of the Past just had Mitchum and Greer in an incredible film together. It's one of my crime favorites. But look, if you haven't seen either of these films, do yourself a favor and make it a double header. My suggestion. Pop some popcorn, get comfy, and start with Out of the Past for some sultry noir, and then follow it with this film, The Big Steal, a more lighthearted, big money caper with plenty of exciting chases and twists and turns. And with these two films, you'll have a great evening. Out of the Past was 1947, and The Big Steal was 1949. They were both excellent films, with Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer in both of them. And honestly, both of these films are worth checking out.